Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television, WGTV Channel 11, WCTV Channel 21, and streaming live on Facebook. If you have a question, just ask it on WCTV's Facebook page or send us a tweet at WCTV Info. I want to thank John Powsey and the staff at CTV3, before I forget it, in Connorsville for airing our show today. I'm your host, Dave Jetmore. I'm sitting in for your regular host, Eric Marsh, who will be joining us again next week. Our guest today is sitting in his usual seat to my left is Dr. Thomas Youth, Vice President of Medical Affairs at Reed Hospital, and protecting me on the right is Christine Simpson, Executive Director of the Wayne County Health Department.
That's right.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm glad you're here. In this ever-moving world of this pandemic, there are changes every day, week, sometimes every hour, it seems. What's going on in the world and in the United States, Tom?
Well, because lots happening. The world is starting to trend down in total cases, but there still are quite a lot, and the U.S. is as well. And Ryan, I don't know if you're able to show that. I didn't warn you ahead of time, so if you can't, that's fine. But actually, the real hotspots around the world are Asia, a couple of countries in South America, and I'm always watching India as one of the very largest countries on Earth, 1.4 billion people, and very much largely a third world healthcare system, and they have been trending up quite a bit lately, and the world there, we can see, is at a little over 19 million cases, 715,000 deaths attributed to COVID. And I don't know if you can click on the India one, Ryan. It's probably, there you go. We can see that, and if I don't know if you're able to enlarge the lower right thing there, Ryan, you can see that India has trended up quite a bit, and right now, India, the U.S., and Brazil are each adding around 60,000 cases a day to the world numbers, and we can see that there. I'm personally concerned about India just because of the state of poverty and access to care, and I actually think the numbers could potentially be underreported because of access and the ability to really count the numbers and report those to the world, so that may be an undercounting. But if you click on the U.S. line there, Ryan, and then expand the lower right one when that updates, we can see that for several weeks now the U.S. has been in a downtrend, but we're still adding upwards of 60,000 cases a day at this point. And I look in trending for the series of lower lows and lower highs. Typically there's a lull in the reporting over weekends and whatnot, so it gives this very distinct week-by-week pattern that we can see there as the cases get reported. And so, yeah, that's good for the U.S., but there's still quite a few cases, and if we were to look at the various states around the country, some of the big ones that have been adding lots and lots of cases have leveled off or are decreasing, but some others are on the increase. And I'm sorry to say that Indiana looks to be firing up again after a little plateau period for a couple of weeks. If we're able to show the Indiana website, Ryan, we can look at that. And but the last 2 days, Indiana reported, I think, in the neighborhood of a little over 1,000 2 days ago, and then about 1,250 or so yesterday. And if you scroll down slightly, we can see that in the uppermost of the graphics on the right there, you can see the last few days there have been an increase in number of cases. We can't enlarge that, so it's a little bit hard to see, possibly. that's disappointing because I was really hoping that we'd be starting to trend down as Ohio has and other states around us. I don't know what this means for us and whether the governor might consider other types of mandates. Have no clue what's going on there. Perhaps Christine has more insight into that with feedback from the State Department of Health. But this is disappointing to me. But the good news is in Wayne County, the numbers or the positivity rate has declined a little bit, which is good. That's kind of an early indicator of disease severity, but we are still seeing higher numbers.
Correct. Yeah.
Christine, how is Wayne County doing, and more specifically, have you had any local outbreaks, and what seems to be some of the commonalities of those outbreaks?
Well, we this week started seeing more schools coming together. Some of the schools opened up. Some of the schools are just coming together and doing practicing, and will be opening up next week. So we did have some noise in the school communities. Particularly, there was a case where a known positive did not comply with the guidelines to isolate when they received their notice that they have a positive COVID test, and continued their life as if nothing was wrong because they felt fine. And a lot of people that happens. We talk a lot about the asymptomatic carriers. So the person felt like perhaps it was a false positive test, which is very rare to have a false positive. It's much more likely to get a false negative test. But they continued on, had interaction in the schools, exposed several school-aged children to the disease, and there was an event that happened in Williamsburg that a lot of people were exposed to, and therefore there's this balloon of people now that have to go into the 14-day isolation. I think one thing that I want to talk to people about is what are the isolation and the quarantine guidelines, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people confuse the two, or it's just not straight in their mind. It'd be great if you could go over that.
Right, and they kind of are the same thing. They're just called something different. When someone tests positive and we know that they have the disease, they are put in isolation where they don't have contact with anyone. We try to exclude them from their family members. And that's for 10 days because we know they have the disease, and we know the disease will course through, and then after 10 days, there's a reasonable assurity that they're no longer spreading the virus. So that's why they have a 10-day guidelines, because we know that course of disease. Someone who's considered a close contact, which is someone that has been in the 6-foot bubble of a known positive. So they've been in that bubble for longer than 15 minutes. They've been in close contact with a known positive. They then have to go into a quarantine, where we're quarantining them away from the rest of society so that we try to stop the spread of disease. We don't know if they have it. We don't know if they don't. So we're going to observe them for 14 days to see if they do develop the illness. If they haven't in those 14 days, then there's a reasonable assurance that they can return back to their normal life. But it's important that when people get the contact from either the State Department of Health or Wayne County or whatever local health department is your jurisdiction, that you abide by those guidelines. And knowing what we've just told you, if you know that you're positive, don't wait for that call from the state health department or the local health department to go ahead and self-isolate or go into quarantine.
Well, thank you. I think that clears a lot of confusion up. I think we have two guests waiting to talk to us today. I think they're in our virtual guest waiting room.
Is that what the virtual chocolates and wine?
Munching on virtual M&Ms, all of which are brown or
I can't get
purple.
myself invited into that room for some reason.
I think they have some virtual wine back there, Tom.
Okay.
And
We'll join
here
them
they are.
afterwards.
I received your names about 5 minutes ago, ladies, and so I
could do a brief introduction if
well,
you'd like me to.
Luckily, Dr. Huth has a much younger brain than I do by, I think, 6 months. And so he will introduce you to our television audience.
Well, and you all can correct me where I get this wrong, But in the lower portion of the picture is Heather Werspinski Cross, who is the director or the dean of nursing. And up in the upper left-hand corner is Jalene Anderson, who is the dean of health sciences at the Richmond campus of Ivy Tech.
Was any of that correct, ladies? Oh, it was.
It was.
It was. Oh, that's very impressive, Dr. Hughes.
Well, it's easy because I've known Heather since she was a little girl, which tells you how old I am. She went to high school with my two oldest sons. And she's got the cutest little boys. And I'm sure Jalene has a really awesome family as well. I just don't know them. Ladies, thank you for being here. I thought it would be fun to have a chat with you, and I appreciate you agreeing to do this on kind of short notice. We only just arranged this yesterday, but they were super accommodating, and I appreciate that. I thought it would be fun to talk to you about your plans, what's been happening at Ivy Tech, how you've been dealing with COVID-19. Maybe we can get some history on how things started off for you when all of this kind of hit the ground on us, and what your plans are going forward. So why don't you go back to the beginning of the start of cases in our county and elsewhere where we were having to consider what to do with schools and work, and how did COVID-19 impact you then, and what were you finding yourselves having to do that you hadn't anticipated?
Sure. Well,
Jill, I'll start us off, and then if I'm, way off base, cut me off here. But for us initially in March, when cases, started to rise and we started to think about what we might need to do differently, at first we thought we're going to continue in all of our clinical sites, and we will screen based on international travel, right? That's where we kind of started. Were they traveling? Did they have fevers and symptoms? And then we quickly saw that was not going to be sufficient, and unfortunately it wasn't going to be good for a lot of us to be in our clinical sites. We are considered guests and visitors, and not always not really essential personnel. So when there were concerns about PPE becoming scarce and other things, it was definitely concerning. And then across the state, we have a lot of campuses at Ivy Tech, and we were noticing a lot of disparity. Some counties had a lot of access to clinical sites and others did not. So as a group of deans, we got together and said, this is not looking good. How are we going to change the course for our students? And put our heads together to move clinical to a virtual format, which sounds really bizarre since nursing is obviously a hands-on profession. And a lot of those things you can't teach on Zoom. But fortunately for us, we were a campus where all of our students had at least half of their clinical time by the time this happened. So we weren't starting fresh with people who'd never done anything, who'd never learned skills, never taken care of patients in person. So we were able to convert our focus a little bit to, let's just look at critical thinking. Let's give some cases, let's do some virtual simulations. We did some simulated telehealth with standardized patients, so that we could keep the nursing mindset going without putting our hands on the patient.
Well, go ahead,
Spring
Jill.
break, we just kind of all exited out right after spring break. And these were all decisions made as a statewide. We have an emergency preparedness team that guided us through everything. Our Ivy Tech has been very, very, very organized about this. So we've just followed those processes. But we had to make some changes, like in phlebotomy and CNA. Thank goodness our CNA was done, so we didn't need to go to clinical for a while. But we did have to make adjustments. Labs were done in a creative way, but they made the adjustment to make everything virtual for the rest of the spring semester. And then we headed into summer, and we had to adapt some more.
And besides the nursing programs, what other programs do we have that probably more fall into your area, Jill? What programs are we talking about there?
We're talking about the certified nursing assistant, the qualified medication aide, the phlebotomy role, the patient care tech, and then all the science labs, because I'm over general studies as well. So how to be creative with doing an anatomy and physiology lab when you can't go in and dissect the pig anymore. So those have been the areas we've been creative. For phlebotomy, we couldn't finish our lab class in the spring, so we did what we call an academy this summer, and we had lots of regulations about it. We had all the protocol where we met them at the door, asked them the screening questions, walked them up to the room, only had 4 in there at a time, wore face shields when we did phlebotomy sticks. So we really carried out all the policies that we needed to keep everyone safe. And we got those spring people finished this summer. Now we're figuring out how to do fall.
Right. So switching over to the coming term, what's the plan moving forward? When do classes resume, for instance, and how are you planning to do it differently?
Sure. So classes for fall resume on August 24th. So it kind of depends on what program, what schools you're looking at as to what the plan is. But I know for us, for nursing, anything we can do virtual, we are continuing to do virtually. And a lot of that is because we have really large class sizes. We don't have space necessarily to accommodate a large number of people in a social distance. So our classroom-based classes are going to continue on Zoom in a synchronous, real-time. Class starts at 9, sign on, your instructor is going to lecture, we'll have real-time interaction. Our labs will have a more hybrid approach where what we can do on Zoom we will, but then we have set times in small groups. So normally our lab sizes are 10 students at a time, but we're going to have 5 at a time at scheduled intervals to have practice of those hands-on skills and their proficiency checkoffs. And then clinical, we're so excited, is going back to traditional. Our clinical partners are opening back up to us, and we're very excited about that. So the screenings really we're using whatever each clinical site is asking us to use for screening students and faculty. But we are so excited to get back out there and get into the hospitals and into the health department and everywhere else around town so that we can get our new students started off on the right foot. And we did make some changes to our clinical schedule for our first year students that are just getting started. Typically, we do a 12-hour clinical day, which is wonderful, but it's at the end, the second 8 weeks of the semester. And we thought about, if cases increase and we have to go virtual again, what happens to those students who never get to touch a patient, when they first started into the program, but also what happens to the student who gets ill, the student who fails that screening and can't come to clinical. If they miss, 2 weeks of 12 hours, that's more than they can miss and pass a course. So we adjusted to a 16-week clinical that was only 6 hours each week. That way, if they did have to quarantine or isolate, they could still come back later and continue their class.
And with the sciences, we have our labs are half the size what they were before. So we have more social distancing and wearing masks. Everyone is wearing a mask anytime they enter this building. We have been very blessed that our facilities have let us in for CNA as well, and even going to provide N95s for those when they go into the long-term care unit. So things should go fairly well. We have a new thing called Learn Anywhere that Ivy Tech is using, and it sounds kind of strange, like how do you do that? But a student can be in a class, and they can do it totally online and be with the same instructor that someone else has who is being zoomed into the classroom, and you can see them on the wall, and people sitting in the class socially distancing and wearing masks. So 3 variations in one section of a class. So I think that's very creative to help meet the needs of the students and the fear level they have of coming back in the building.
Well, I just had a couple of other questions for you, and then I'll see if Dr. Jetmore or Christine have any. And one of those has to do with the sort of demographic of your students. My perception is it's maybe a little bit of a different demographic of folks at Ivy Tech compared to, say, IU East or certainly Earl. Maybe a little bit older. Many of them are trying to juggle even full-time jobs, and they have special needs and situations, and that dramatically impacts the way you construct your programming. Do you think that some of those special needs, people with kids and jobs and so forth, are those? Do you think those are going to be different in the context of COVID? And how are you planning to deal with that?
I think that's something that Ivy Tech was very smart about from the beginning. In the spring, when, like Jill said, kind of as a state been led by our safety and response team and by our provost to think about the fact that our demographic of students is different. And a lot of our students are juggling, kids at home and work and school. And so I think the Learn Anywhere approach is one way that we're trying to make it accessible, so that if you can't get childcare, you have to work that day, you don't have to attend that live session of your Learn Anywhere course. You can come to the online version and catch up later on. But if you can be there in person, if you can be there in Zoom, great. So I do think that's definitely one way that they're making an attempt to make sure that people have access. Jill, what else?
Our population has gotten younger over the years because we used to be very much the non-traditional, but we have more and more traditional. But we do have that problem with maybe not having good computer access to do all these things virtual and Zoom and online. And that's been a struggle. And we've tried to work with students, trying to accommodate that, telling them where there are hot spots that they can go sit in a parking lot if they need to. Now that our building is open, though, we will be adapting that some people could sit here and do some of that they couldn't do at their home because they do not have that appropriate internet.
Okay.
Yes, they're dealing with a lot of things at a lot of time, and we're trying to be as understanding as we can without watering down or not meeting our objectives.
Good. And I always like to ask folks who are involved in education about what are your thoughts and plans around testing, symptom monitoring, setting expectations with the students and with staff about what they're to do to safeguard themselves and safeguard others. What are you planning about all that?
As I mentioned before, for nursing, clinically, we are screening, based on all of the clinical site screening policies, which are very similar when you look at them. But do you have any symptoms such as fever, respiratory symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, all of those things that we've come to hear a lot of in the last few months. So we alert students and faculty in advance of what are those screening expectations, and please don't report to the site if you know that you have these. And then as far as on campus, as Jill mentioned, we've kind of socialized with our faculty, our staff, and our students the same things. If you are symptomatic, please don't come. We have virtual options for you for that time that you need to isolate or quarantine. And we are all wearing masks on campus, and we are providing masks to students as well. They're a nice Ivy Tech green, so you'll see us in our Ivy Tech colors. And then we are working to keep campus density low, in addition to having people screen and not attend if they're ill. So we are rotating days that faculty and staff are there to help students. So you can see by Jill's setting, today's her day in the office. Mine's Wednesdays, but that's one way that we're trying to keep people from becoming infected. Jill, are there specific screenings that you're doing for phlebotomy, like for completion?
We did for our completion academy. We had to send a plan in to get it approved, and we are not doing the temperatures, but we are doing, we did for that the screening questions. But the statement is on a sign as they come in the door. It will be repeated in the classrooms, and we have on our website, we have a big column that says, get your COVID information here. So it will be stressed over and over and over again. And I think we're being very, very diligent.
Sounds great. Now, usually by this point in the interview process, I have tried very hard to take all the good questions and leave nothing for my colleagues, but they usually surprise me by coming up with a couple of insightful ones that I hadn't thought of. So let me ask them.
Well, I'll go first.
What do you want to know?
As Dr. Hughes notes, he does always suck up all the good questions and leave the crumbs on the floor for the rest of us. I don't have a specific question, but I want to say we're lucky to have you two, and we're lucky to have Ivy Tech, which is a fantastic institution in our community. I have taken classes at Ivy Tech. I'm a graduate of your welding class, something that I know will make Dr. Hughes incredibly jealous because I don't think he knows how to weld. Although Christine
I have
may.
no idea.
I do.
Do you have any?
actually.
Do you have any questions, Christine?
No, I just will tell you, as I'm navigating my way through this, I'll share. I have a degree in health science from Ball State, so Go Health Sciences.
And come and teach.
Yeah. Oh, well, when I think about when I went to college, and I'm much younger than these two guys here, so,
Hey.
but could you imagine what it was like, what it would have been like when we were in college to go through this? We would not have had even the ability to Zoom into classes.
Oh, right.
And the telemedicine and how lucky these students are that are in college right now, that they're on the ground floor of what I think medicine is going to be. You know, we're going to see a big shift in how we treat patients from here on out. And these students are learning it this way, so they're not going to have to change their mindsets. And so I think it's a very exciting time for students. It's a very exciting time for medicine right now.
I think this has really speeded up a lot of change that was coming, but it would have been much slower than the pace is proceeding at now. Well, thank you so much for joining us and adding to our show. We're very appreciative. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thanks. I think, Ryan, we have some questions from our Facebook page that have been posted on Facebook. Why don't we see some of those questions, Ryan? How many of Wayne County's 300-plus lab-confirmed positive patients have been hospitalized for COVID symptoms since the illness started?
You guys brought that back on purpose.
Yeah. You
And
brought it back.
Christine and I went away with homework to try to figure this out, and we just could not come up with a number. What's the problem with getting that number, Christine?
The problem is that the NBS site, which is where all cases are reported, are not routinely updated. So once someone has that positive, they don't necessarily go back in and put when they're hospitalized. They're very good about putting in when someone passes. So I know that is accurate. But I did go back through and looked at all of that, and it is way off. I don't even want to tell you what that says, because I knew of just through my work of several people that had been hospitalized, but doesn't show that on NBS. So,
Well, that question was from last week, and Ryan apologized in my ear for giving us that question again. Last week we said we didn't know the answer, but we're gaining traction here because now we don't know the answer, but we're telling you the reason why we don't know the answer. So we're gaining ground. I
have put a call into ISDH to ask them, because they do track hospitalizations and they report that. So can they give me Wayne County's information, because that is reported from the state. So they may have a better database that they can share with me. But right now I do not have that. Okay. I will continue to try to get that answer and let you guys know what that is.
Okay, so the research is ongoing. We're going to get to the bottom of this sooner or later. Do we have another question, Ryan? I've been in a couple establishments here in Richmond where the workers weren't wearing masks, one being a restaurant. Should the public report that to the health department?
Absolutely. Please call the health department. And I would tell you the phone number for the health department, but for some reason I cannot get our phone number in my head. I know it's 765-973, I think it's 9245.
I can have Ryan, our research staff of one, look that number up and give it to me.
I always kind of get like a deer in a headlight when someone wants me to give it, because I don't know, it's because there's too much other stuff going in my head right now that I can't get that. But yeah, if you see an establishment that is blatantly disregarding masking, especially if it's a food establishment, that is one of the things that we have a lot of control over. Again, we try to gain compliance through education. And so we will make a visit out there, we'll talk to them, we'll explain, the regulation if it's that they don't have masks. Our commissioners have been very generous in providing the community with these masks, and we will give them the masks that they need for their employees to wear those masks. The more all of us wear masks, the more compliance that we can get in this, the better off as a community we're going to be. The better our schools are going to be, the better our nursing homes are going to be, the better all of us will be.
And I think the one thing you said, which I think is important, when you go out there, it's not in a confrontational manner. Our interest is, as you said, in educating people and making them safe as well as their customers. So,
I think us setting an example is a really good thing to do, but, I think retail establishments are maybe a little bit more likely to do what they perceive their customer base tells them. So it's one thing for the health department to come in and try to educate and so forth, and that's a process that has to happen. But I feel like if I'm in a place in a retail establishment and I don't like what I see, I leave. But before I leave, I tell the manager or the clerk, somebody at the desk, why I'm leaving. And I think if more of us did that, they would then be hearing from their customer base and be more likely to try to do the right thing.
And we don't have to be, I've heard, mask Nazis, mask snitch, and things like that. I don't want people to feel like that. We don't have to berate people about this. We don't have to get on our pulpit and preach about this, although I do daily and weekly, when I'm talking about it. But as a citizen, just like you said, if we just quietly let an establishment know, listen, I'm going to leave because I don't feel safe here. You're not wearing masks, and this isn't safe for our community, and then leave quietly. I don't like to see the things on Venmo or whatever these apps are of people throwing fits and stuff like that. I don't think, either side, the people that don't wear masks or the people that do, anytime you throw a fit, it's not a real effective way to get people to see your point of view.
and there's the number for the health department on the bottom
that
of the
right?
screen.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
We're going to cut Christine
973
slack on the phone
9279.
number issue because we have to remember she is,
Elderly?
no. You just said you're younger than us,
Well.
so you're a spring chicken. But no, you're new to the organization. I think we all need to remember that. You're still new, but you jumped in right into the middle of all this. So you got a little distracted, and plus you all moved in the middle of this. So,
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges there.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up that we moved. We still routinely get people that are confused on who is at 100 South Fifth Street, and that's the health department. So our environmental division, our vital records division, and public health nursing are at 100 South Fifth Street. The wellness clinic, which used to be the Wayne County Community Clinic, is still at their location on Main Street. So if you had a doctor at that clinic before, you can still see that same doctor at that clinic. But your public health services have all moved to 100 South Fifth Street.
all right. Ryan, do we have another question from our viewing audience? With current surge in cases, is there any discussion of not allowing schools to open in person in the next 2 weeks?
I think, didn't I hear that? I think Seton schools are going to delay their in-person opening until September sometime. That's the only one I know of.
Yeah, Seton, Richmond Friends,
Okay.
they've both decided to delay the start of their school. Richmond Community Schools have went to kind of a hybrid mode where they will have an A team and a B team, and they'll alternate days. So there are some different avenues out there. I think all schools have offered the choice if you want to do e-learning or in-person learning. Statewide, there is not discussion to not start schools in person. I believe the governor is a very firm believer that it is as safe as we can make it to bring the kids back into the schools. And we've had a lot of discussion with ISDH, with the schools. There's a meeting every Friday at 10 a.m. It's a webinar where the state puts on some trainings for the school nurses, and the local health departments are there. So we kind of have our discussions there. Is it 100% safe? No, it's not. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So there's nothing guaranteed. But I do believe that the plans that the schools have given to the health department and that we've looked at, I think they have reasonable plans in place to protect staff and students as best that can be done in the middle of a pandemic. I liked what Dr. Bach said this week. She said a case of COVID-19 in the schools is not time to panic, it's time to react. And we've already had that. We've had more than one school have positive cases, whether it's in staff or students. And the kind of the first reaction to everyone is to panic. Oh, okay, what? And it's like, okay, well, let's look at our plan. What does our plan say to do? And once we take that deep breath in and we look at our plan and we put it in place, it becomes very clear because the plans were full. You know, they did a really good job of laying out what do we do when. We knew that there will be cases of COVID in the schools to start with, in the middle, and until this ends, we will see cases of COVID in the schools. It's how we react to them when we have them. And what we can do to lessen how many cases there are in schools. That's where we get into that if you're sick, stay home. You know, that self-assessment that's done with the students and the staff before you get to school. So if we can stop the case from coming into school, when we do have one in the school, then isolating the close contacts and reducing how many other students get sick.
Well, do we have another question, Ryan? Did local use of hydroxychloroquine entail early illness or late illness treatment, pre-hospitalization or hospitalized status?
Sure. The answer to that question is we very early on our teams were using hydroxychloroquine on every patient who was on ventilators, who was sick enough to require high-level ventilatory support. And then we entered into a clinical study, which is what was recommended by the Infectious Disease Society of America, that certain types of treatment, including hydroxychloroquine, really should be done as part of clinical studies. And the clinical study we entered into actually lowered the severity at which hydroxychloroquine would be administered to just, they were increasing oxygen requirements, weren't necessary. You know, the whole point of that particular arm was to see if it could prevent the progression to respiratory failure and need for ventilation. And so we participated in that. I don't think in either, at any stage at the point that we were using hydroxychloroquine, did we really detect noticeable benefit, but it was hard to say. Everybody was getting it. So we didn't really have comparison groups to know, and the clinical study arm was a randomized study, but we didn't have enough patients really randomized to it to really know for sure how that was going to work. So I think there is interest on people's parts on whether hydroxychloroquine given at a very early stage of COVID, when people just get a diagnosis and they have minor symptoms, whether it maybe can prevent later progress of disease and severer outcomes, or give it as in what we would call post-exposure prophylaxis, which would be, I've been exposed to somebody with COVID-19. If I take hydroxychloroquine now, can I prevent getting sick at all? We did not do that here in any organized way. I can't say it was never done because I don't know all the situations where it was prescribed. But I do know that there have been a couple of randomized studies on those two issues, giving it early in active disease or giving it in post-exposure prophylaxis. And they're good studies. Both of them were negative, kind of had negative results. There was not a detectable benefit, and in both of those studies, there were adverse events on the treatment arm that that were significantly different from the placebo arm on both studies. So, unfortunately, the best studies still with hydroxychloroquine are really kind of negative. there are over 900 publications regarding hydroxychloroquine. Unfortunately, the vast majority are low-quality observational studies or retrospective chart reviews. The best we can get from from the vast majority of those studies is that there may be an association with better outcome, but that doesn't mean it caused it. You know, there's an old adage in science that correlation is not causation. You know, there can be other factors that affect whether it just happens that people who in those observational retrospective studies, chart review type studies, that some people seem to do better with, did better who were on hydroxychloroquine. That's an association, it's a correlation, but it's not causation. So we look to the better quality studies, particularly the randomized controlled type studies, even better if they're blinded. And unfortunately, the best ones published to date really don't show an advantage. And so really that's why it's generally recommended not to lean on hydroxychloroquine or expect too much of it. I will say, in terms of the post-exposure prophylaxis and maybe earlier treatment, all these things should have more study, but they should be part of clinical studies that have the right kinds of controls and randomization to really get the best data from them. So I don't have a problem with studying them, but as far as making hydroxychloroquine the standard treatment, that's just not happening anytime soon.
When I was younger, my dad.
I will say, I've waded into the hydroxychloroquine debate again, and my email inbox, my phone messages, and a number of other messaging avenues. I'm not going to get deluged with people trying to set me straight. So don't bother. I don't need all that. I've looked at the mass of the studies on this, and unfortunately, that's where I'm at. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Were you going to say something, Christine?
Oh, I was just going to, when you talked about causation versus correlation, my dad, when I was real little, I remember him telling me that the sun didn't come up because the rooster crowed.
Right.
And I never understood that until I got a little older, and he was meaning that, correlation doesn't mean that that's what caused it.
Yeah.
And
Well, let's move on from rooster crowing.
I thought you would like that, Dr. Gentleman.
I like any rural analogy. You're right. I have a rural bias. What's our next question, Ryan? What would be the best workouts to prepare us for getting the virus? Maybe stronger lungs?
Well, gosh, I don't know that. First of all, we don't have scientific data on this, but it makes sense that if we're more physically fit, healthier, not smoking, smoking is an independent risk factor for poor outcome with COVID-19. So not smoking, healthy habits, there is a correlation. Now, this is not causation, but there's a correlation with vitamin D levels, that people who have good vitamin D levels seem to do better.
Don't you think that in general, the better physical shape, the better health a person is in, and this, this can be achieved to some degree with, along with diet and rest, working out. The better physical shape you're in, the more resistant you tend to be to disease.
Just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think it's kind of intuitive.
I can't prove it with a study, but, I think, that's my personal plan is I'm trying to eat right, lose a little bit of weight, make sure that I'm getting exercise, because I don't want to get sick, and if I do get sick, I want to be able to recover more quickly. These are tried and true things that we know make a difference. And the converse of that is people who are debilitated, unhealthy, have unhealthy habits, have poor nutrition, they just do worse with all kinds of diseases.
Yeah.
But I like where this person was thinking.
Yeah.
I like what
Yeah.
they're thinking about that of what can we do to prepare, and
Yeah.
naturally your lungs and your
And-
heart.
And this is what we tell our patients. I mean, the better habits you have, the better you treat your body in terms of diet, activity, and keeping things like tobacco and alcohol to a minimum, the more likely you are to survive any disease. Do we have another question, Ryan? At one point, the false negatives were roughly 40%. Is that still true, or is the testing accuracy
I think
better
that's
now?
kind of the reverse. The sensitivity is about 70% for the standard PCR nasal swab test to detect.
Now, why don't you tell our viewers what you mean by that, the sensitivity?
Yeah, so sensitivity is think of it as the ability to detect a condition when it is present. And so if we had 100 people standing before us who all had COVID-19 and we did the nasal swab test on them, we're probably going to detect 70 or so of them. That number has not particularly changed. That's the 70% sensitivity. That means those other 30 or so, if they're a typical sample, are going to be false negatives, right? So what was the question? Show that again, because maybe I read it too quickly, and the question said false negatives, but so the false negative rate with a standard PCR test.
The question was, before they reported a 40% false negative, is that still the case?
Yeah, 30-ish, something like that, I guess is the right way to think about it. The studies are between 60 and 80%, so most people pick 70 right in the middle. The flip side of it is what we call specificity, which is the ability to detect a negative person as negative. And so if we had 100 people in front of us who did not have COVID-19, and we tested them all, how many of them would test negative correctly? And with the standard PCR test, that number is generally agreed to be about 98% specificity, meaning 2 out of that 100 may test positive. They'd be false positives. So that's the way to look at that. So that we have to consider not just the false negatives, but also the false positives, and that gives us a better idea about what to expect if we just go test random people and they test positive. What's the positive predictive value is the corollary issue, and what's the negative predictive value. It just happens that with the prevalence that it likely is, COVID-19 is in society, even though we've had increasing cases, the predicted prevalence from the IU School of Public Health Studies, for instance, suggested around 3 to 4% in the latest study. So let's just use the 3% number as prevalence. That means if we take 100 people off the street, 3 of them are likely to have active COVID-19, 97 not, and so what that means is those 3 that have it, with the 70% sensitivity, 2 of them are probably going to test positive. 1 of the true positives is going to test negative. They're a false negative. Out of the 97 that are actually negative, if we test all of them, then 98% of that 97 are going to test negative. That would actually leave 2 or so. So basically, out of a random population sample, we should expect to have about 3 positives, one or 2 of which is a true positive, 1 or 2 of which is a false positive. So that's how we have to look at it.
Go
Do I
ahead.
have time to add something there?
Well, we've got 2 or 3 more questions, and then I think Dr. Huth has brought some charts that I think we'd like to look at, but go ahead and make your comment.
Quickly, I do know in some of the studies that I've read that where you test in the disease also will play a little bit of factor in that false negative. So someone that begins to show symptoms, they go get tested, they have a higher percent of having a false negative rather than if they test 5 or 6 days after they started showing symptoms. We have a little
we
bit
can
more.
get into discussions about whether that's truly a false negative. You know, if they're coming down with the COVID-19, but there isn't enough genetic material from the virus for the test to be positive, is that a false negative? The real false negative is when somebody's actually producing the genetic material, and the test should pick it up, but it does not.
Oh, okay. All right.
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
When we test in the course of their disease is going to definitely impact the ability of that to be positive, even if they do have COVID-19.
Ryan, can we have the next question? Do you recommend parents with children doing virtual learning to stop allowing their children to play with kids who are still attending school in person?
That's a public health question.
That is a public health question. I think that we all need to have a small group of people that we're interacting with through this. So if this is, your core group of people, then, you can continue with that. But we need to limit who that is, and I do that in my personal life. I'm not as social as I was pre-pandemic, because I'm trying to reduce the amount of people that is possibly exposing me and my family. In particular, because I have a son that has got a compromised immune system. So looking at your risk factors, and if you're homeschooling your children or having them do e-learning and there's a concern of them coming down with it and exposing a family member to it, then you may want to rethink who your circle of friends are, because you have to look at their risk factors too.
Well, I think it's interesting. The reason most likely that the child is having e-learning or virtual learning is because the parents do not feel that it's safe for him to be around the children at school. So it makes no sense for them to keep their children away from those kids where they're in school and then let them play with the children. So what's the next question, Ryan? Could doctors discuss any new information about being able to contract COVID-19 from surfaces as well as soft surfaces like mail?
Well, I think, early on in the pandemic, we thought that might be an issue, but there wasn't a lot of data on that. I'm not actually aware of too much, and Christine might know differently from understanding the contact tracing process and maybe reports from the state and such, but I'm not actually aware of any significant outbreaks that are related to surface contact. It's really more direct person-to-person spread, which I guess is a good thing. So I think we can, maybe de-emphasize the contact portion of this a little bit, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't still, use good hygiene and
Right.
decontaminate surfaces and so forth. I'm still doing that.
Yeah, I think that we don't want to take out that leg of our response, which is good hand hygiene and cleaning down, disinfecting high-touch surfaces. Because the more we can reduce the other kind of diseases too, then we're not confusing those. And when you look at noroviruses, you look at the flu and all of this, the more that we can reduce all of those, the less we have all of these diseases happening at one time. But you're correct. We don't have that emphasis on touch surfaces and the transmission in that. We're seeing most of the transmission through airborne droplets, through the respirations. So, but that doesn't mean to say that we just, good, we don't have to clean down countertops and doorknobs anymore. I don't know of any that has been transmitted in like the mail. I think that was something that no one.
That was an
ever
early
thought
fear that
yeah.
was disproved. People were worried about getting mail from China. Did you bring any charts for us this week, Dr. Hughes?
Ryan started with, he actually showed the Wayne County numbers a little bit, and we saw that those were up. In Reed, we can see that Reed's numbers continue to be up compared to a month or so ago. However, they moderated a little bit this week. We're doing an average of whatever the number there is, 25 patients a day in isolation, And this morning, we actually had no patients on ventilator. We had been running one a day for the last 2 weeks or so.
You know, we
So
need to celebrate
that was
those
good.
things.
We should.
I
yeah.
can't remember when the last
I mean,
time
that's really
that there
good.
was none.
I mean, I come in here and I say, oh, we had, this morning we had 1 or 2, and over the course of the week we had an average of X, but like it's some dull statistical thing. But no, that's a real person.
That's
and
a
so
real
when,
person.
To not have anybody on a ventilator early this morning is really good. We like that.
And look at some of the earlier numbers at what was the most we've ever had on ventilators at Reed? At
16.
16. That
Way
That
back
was a
in the
scary-
end of April.
yeah,
was
that's
very
then
scary.
you're
That's-
starting to
that's a
think
scary high number,
That was
true.
back when we were talking about do we have enough ventilators?
Mm-hmm.
The president was talking about having the motor companies start to make ventilators.
New York
importing
was splitting
ventilators from
ventilators.
abroad.
Yeah,
So we've come a long way from there.
we sure have.
We should be thankful.
Those are the daily numbers for the last 3 weeks. And I think we're, it's been up and down, but I think we feel like we're doing a little bit better in the last couple days. That's the Queen
Nope.
County numbers. And I can't see that
71.
that bar. I think it was 71
Yep, 71.
for the week ending last Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it's going this week so far. Christine, how is it going?
It's a little noisy. High, and then a couple of lows. I don't have those exact numbers. I think our lowest day was 9, and then our highest day was 17. And remember, those are just the laboratory confirmed
Right.
cases. So I think that we're probably going to come in under 71 for this week, but not by too much.
I think
It's a little noisy right now, and I think it's going to get a little more noisy as schools open back up, and a lot of that is going to become because now children will go get tested where before they really aren't being tested. So
Yeah.
I think we might hear a little bit more noise.
Here's our last graph. I think it shows our age grouping.
Yeah, the dark bar is the most recent, the last half of the pandemic so far, and really just reiterating a point I've made several times that the age demographic is shifting to lower age groups in the Wayne County data.
All right. Well, as we get toward the latter minutes in our show, I once again want to thank John Pawsey and his staff at CTV3 in Connersville for airing Ask the Doctors. I want to thank all of you out there in our viewing audience for watching us. I hope you can join us next Friday for another episode of Ask the Doctors. I think we always like to post this every week. There's free COVID-19 testing. It's Monday through Friday from 8 to 8. If you can register online, or if I'd check ahead of time, because sometimes the staff is up and down there, but if they have plenty of staff, you can simply walk in and be tested.
I'm going shortly
Thank
after
you,
this.
Christine, for being here with us
Yes.
today. Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for all your sage remarks. Thank you so much to our viewers. Tune in with us for next week, and be healthy.